Welcome to Flashpoints. I'm Jeff Pegues, joined by CBS News senior national security analyst Juan Zarate. There is a story in the South China Sea. That's where the Chinese have been building artificial islands. The U.S., of course, believes it's international waters. The Pentagon chief, Ash Carter, has criticized the construction. And here's what the president had to say on the issue on Monday.
And the truth is that China is going to be successful. It's big, it's powerful. Its people are talented and they work hard, and it may be that some of their claims are legitimate, but they shouldn't just try to establish that based on throwing elbows and pushing people out of the way. If in fact their claims are legitimate, people will recognize them.
So strategically, what does this mean for the U.S.?
Well, what you see is a manifestation of what many experts have said is an inevitable competition between China and the U.S. China growing in power economically, militarily, beginning to spread its wings and to bear its fangs a bit. And certainly when it comes to the South China Sea, in some ways a testing ground for their power, because this is where they not only see their prime interest in their near abroad, they see their maritime interest, the role for their Navy, but also where they have territorial disputes with a number of America's allies, the Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, even Vietnam. And so what you have is the manifestation of this stress between two powers, and in China really a power that is beginning to feel its own strength and weight, and trying to figure out strategically where it's headed as well. And so that's why you have the president, Secretary Carter, all talking about China and trying to figure out not only how to calm tensions, but also figure out what the U.S. is going to do vis-a-vis a rising Chinese power in the region. Well,
you know what happens in government. Are you surprised at all by the fact that the Pentagon chief is taking a harder line than the White House is?
No, sometimes this is choreographed. Sometimes it's the will of a cabinet secretary to speak his or her mind, and so sometimes it depends. But I think there's something healthy about an open discussion about how we're going to treat China, because in many ways China is an ally and needs to be. You see the role that they're playing around the world. They're a chief trading partner for the U.S. There's entanglements economically. They're a competitor. You see this in some of the ways that we've seen in the South China Sea, for example, or in other parts of the world where they're competing for interest and reach in the developing world. And finally, they are in some ways an enemy, right? You look at what they've done in the cyber domain. Their cyber economic espionage has been devastating to research and development in the U.S. And so this is a complicated relationship and a complicated time with China rising. And so I think it's sometimes healthy to have different voices in the government expressing different views, with the president in some ways sitting atop it all, providing kind of a strategic vision and a calming voice. That's generally the way it works.
You know, this is fascinating in that the boundaries of the relationship between the Chinese and the Americans are still being drawn. And you say this is a complicated relationship, but that's something that people have been saying now for years.
Right. Well, and it's part of the reason you had the Obama administration say, look, we're pivoting to Asia, in part because this is where not only you have economic growth and opportunity, but it's also where you have the challenge of the rise of other powers like China and India, and so it deserves more diplomatic and economic attention. The reality, though, is we haven't been sure as to what the rise of China ultimately looks like. Are they going to become a military competitor first and foremost? Will there be a flashpoint that causes conflict in the region?
Flashpoint.
Where the U.S. has to step in? Or will this be a gradual rise of a responsible global power with China solving problems around the world? Keep in mind, Jeff, that most of the major problems that we have are bordering states to China: Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, North Korea. And so at what point does China become a problem solver and not a problem maker? And so you know, we're still grappling with what is the nature of this relationship. And I think that as we move into the presidential cycle, China suddenly becomes a political football because of issues of trade, security, and this broader strategic question.
All right. Juan Zarate, the activity in the South China Sea, something that you've been encouraging us to talk about for some time.
Got to watch it.
All right,
Thank
we
you,
will.
Jeff.
For Juan Zarate, I'm Jeff Pegues, and that is Flashpoints.